the Digital Babble with your host, Flipper. Colorful commentary on your photography. Seen on fingerlakes1.com.
Hey, everybody. It's the Digital Babble here on fingerlakes1.tv. And you can go check out our website at tdbny.com. And this is the Digital Babble, and this is all about photography and Photoshop with me, Flipper. And basically, this week is going to be all about lenses and lens length and how to choose between different types of lenses. What are you looking for price-wise? Some different examples. And it's going to give you a little bit more information about, how to buy with confidence, but at the same time, give you some different lenses to use for different shots, different ideas, different situations. Or if you're in the point and shoot realm of cameras, what do you want for a zoom range and why is it better to get one over the other? So starting right off, some of the big things is with lenses is you have fixed or not fixed lenses, or prime or zoom lenses. Prime lenses are a fixed length and basically give you a higher quality lens usually. So like saying a 35 millimeter lens or a 50 millimeter lens, and it's only going to be 50 millimeter. Where a zoom lens would give you a range. So 28 millimeter to 135 millimeter. So you got a nice range. So you can zoom in, zoom out, change your composition without changing your body or changing your position. Whereas the prime lens, you're the zoom. You have to walk in, walk out, change your perspective. You have to do the movement, the mechanics of it. So some of the key aspects of these lenses are zoom range and focal lengths. So like if you're talking zoom, like I said, the larger the zoom or the more X there is in a point and shoot. So 3X zoom, 4X zoom means the further you can go from wide angle to very narrow angle or telephoto, which would then be a long lens. So another feature of lenses and point and shoots that you need to consider is the speed or the maximum aperture. So if you got a 50 millimeter f1.2 primes lens, it's going to be a super fast lens with a wide opening for their aperture at 50 millimeters. Whereas maybe you got a zoom lens that would be like a 28 to 135, maybe an f3.5. So that's a little slower of a lens, but you get a zoom range. So you can zoom in, zoom out without changing your position. So what are some of the different lengths good for, or let's define them. When we talk about wide angle, we're talking about 24 millimeter to 40 millimeter. Great for scenery or getting indoor shots, environmental portraits, and distorted close-ups. And the reason why I say distorted close-ups, the closer you are to your subject with a wide angle lens, the more of a distortion you get. So like the outside, like actually you can almost see it like here with my hands, considering that this is kind of a wide angle lens webcam. You can see as I put my hands here, they look fairly proportioned and everything looks good. I get closer and things start getting distorted and way out of proportion. And it's kind of the element of the lens, depending on how wide your lens is. And the further wider you get, the more you get distortion. Then you finally get into what we call fisheye, which we'll talk about in just a second. Since wide angle lens range usually is naturally lets more light in, since it's a shorter lens, the light doesn't have as far as travels, not so many elements of glass in between the subject and the film plane. Short lenses tend to be better for low light situations. So saying you're in a low light situation, if you have a 28 millimeter lens and you can move up close enough to your subject, you're going to be able to light it up a lot better versus sitting way in the back with a 200 millimeter lens. Even at f2.8, you might not be able to get that indoor dark shot. So nighttime portraits and stuff like that, sometimes you can get a lot better shots by just getting closer. One one of my photography friends always said, if you're not getting good enough pictures, your pictures just don't seem like they're coming out good enough, get closer. And he's absolutely right with some aspects of that. Like saying if you're taking shots of your kids, or you're maybe you're at a picnic and you're kind of checking things out. One of the big things is with maybe you're at that picnic and you're too far away and the person just doesn't look right framed up in the picture that you took. Move closer. You might be able to get just an isolation picture of the subject, or you might be able to get a different composition and things might line up better. So wide angle lens, great for those things. Then you have the next step down, which is extreme wide angle lens and fisheye. 4 to 24 millimeter, great for distorted scenery. If you like to see scenery that's distorted, I got a couple of examples, I think, in the next section here that show a fisheye effect. You have circular fisheye, which is it comes out like a bulb, like the outside edges are black because you're actually seeing the casing of the lens, and then the center circle is the fisheye effect, which would be very wide angle and very distorted in some areas. A good example or a telltale sign that it's a fisheye lens or a very wide angle lens is if you look at your horizon and it bows, literally just kind of bows over. Usually that's wide angle or extremely wide angle. Like a 24 millimeters considered probably just wide angle, but I tend to put it also in the extreme wide angle because it does, on a full frame camera, the edges start to bow that horizon one way or the other. So keeping that in mind. What are wide angle or extreme wide angle lenses great for? Distorted scenery, capturing a large close area in one frame. So saying if you're trying to take a really large or wide area in one shot, saying you want to get from the door to the closet and it's quite wide, it's 180 degrees or something. A wide angle or a fisheye might be able to grab all 180 degrees. Or at least maybe the majority of it. You might be able to get 140 degrees or 160 degrees or something of that nature. And by collecting all that light and then putting it onto the film plane through the use of glass and lenses, it gives you some interesting photos. You can really get some interesting distortion, interesting compositions. I saw somebody the other day who did a fisheye thing of themselves. It was a self-portrait. The camera was kind of sitting here and kind of shooting this way. They were looking up at it going, ah, and then you got the entire room that they were standing in, and they were all distorted. Their head was real big, their feet were really tiny, but then you could see different elements of the room, and it just kind of gave an interesting effect to an environmental portrait. It also does work fairly well in low light, again, because it's shorter distance and probably less glass to get the light from here to here onto the film plane. So low light can be used. This can be used in low light and probably be a help. And of course, the funny distortion effect. Back to that idea of being distorted and having the funny thing. One photographer I saw recently online, I really got to start writing down their names, did what they call, he called the Laughing Cow series. And what it was basically he took an extremely wide angle or a fisheye lens, shoved it right up into the cow's face and took the pictures. And they all look like they're happy or laughing. And they're just normal everyday cows. You go find them out at a farm or whatever. But this guy really had a knack for finding this particular laughing cow thing, and he made a whole series about it, and it was just really entertaining to look at the photos, look at the composition, and look at the photographer's eye. Why did he take that photo? And it was really interesting to see some of that stuff. Next lens group in line is the normal lens. 40 to 70 millimeter is about normal. And what that does is great for environmental portraits. You're still capturing a pretty wide angle. So you can get a portrait of somebody maybe building a bicycle or a motorcycle, and they're in the portrait. They're there, plus the environment to tell a story. Great for close-ups. Like, I really like a 50 millimeter lens for a head and shoulder shot. especially if you got like a 50 millimeter f1.8 or an f1.2 lens, prime. That way there's no zoom. You move in nice and close and you get that head and shoulder shot here, and put that at 1.2, f1.2, or even f2 or f2.8 or even f3, anywhere down there. And it's amazing. You're so close to the person, and as long as you put the background way behind them, everything it just gets nice and soft. So it kind of makes it look like you had a studio shot, and you really never had a studio to do it in. It was just taking it outside. You got really close. The photographer got really close to get the head and shoulder shot. The background just totally blurs right out. Very nice, very vivid colors usually. I've got a Canon 50 millimeter lens that I use on my large camera. You can also set your point and shoots to 50 millimeter, and then do the same thing. Move up on the person, and you can get that same effect. So anytime that I'm talking about these different ranges, you can do the same thing with your point and shoot, depending on if it has an equivalent. Most point and shoots do have an equivalent of a wide angle to a telephoto angle zoom lens on there, and depending on where you have it set, depends on what you're going to get. So another great technique for taking portraits is in studio, you're back about 15 feet, and you got a 70 or maybe even an 80 millimeter lens on. You put the subject out there to fill the frame where you want to fill it. You put a light on them, such as a flash or a continuous light, and you fire away your photos. And you just have to tell the person, move here, do that, do. And you just keep shooting photos until you get the right one. And that range just makes a lot of things. As long as the backdrop is not right on top of the person, you got to leave that backdrop a foot or two behind them. But usually it softens the backdrop up just a little bit, but really keeps them tack sharp and focuses right on the eyes, especially if you focus on the eyes first. It really comes out really good, really nice. So normal lenses, great for portraits, great for natural looking shots. 50 millimeter is what they say is what the human eye sees at. So if you're looking to reproduce something you saw, 50 millimeters is usually about where you want to do it. If you're on different types of cameras, you might have a little bit of a shift there. You might be at 40 millimeters or 60 millimeters, but right around 50 is where the human eye sees. So that being said, next group is telephoto. 70 to 200 millimeter is standard telephoto. Great for portraits, head and shoulder shots, and long range. So like saying you're at the zoo, you want that penguin over there. You can pop that 200 millimeter or 70 to 200 millimeter up, find where they are in the zoom range, and hit it up. Now, you can also use a prime lens. You could use a 200 millimeter prime lens. A lot better quality. You'll see a lot better color quality, light quality with prime lenses than you do with zoom lenses. And the reason why is there's less glass between the subject out here and the film plane in your camera. So that being said, using a prime lens eliminates a lot of elements, because you have to have all those elements to be able to twist the lens and change the focal length accordingly. And really it enhances the quality of the photo. So if you're really looking to get some really neat shots and you're really looking to get some better quality shots, prime lenses are the way to go. If you can afford some basic prime lenses, you can't beat it. The big problem with prime lenses, you got to move the zoom function. You have to move the camera to get the shot. Anyway, telephoto, it can also double as an makeshift macro lens. A lot of times, most zoom lenses, especially the longer zoom lenses, will come with a macro setting so that you can actually, focus on something, so, maybe a foot away with a 200 millimeter lens, and it'll blow it up nice and big right inside your camera, right on the film plane. Makes it look really nice. So, it could be a makeshift macro lens. A lot of people like to use the 70 to 200 millimeter range for sports shots. I know other photographers that say you got to be up there around 400 millimeter range. It just depends on your taste and where you're standing. I mean, if you're down at the field, you might be able to get away with a 70 to 200. or even a 70 to 200 with a 2x converter on it. So you actually get 140 to 400. So there's a lot of options. And like I said, telephotos are a nice range of lens as well. Extreme telephoto is where you start getting into the 200 plus range, like 300s and 400s and 500s and 600s and 1200s. I've seen 1200 millimeter lenses. You want to spend $1,400 or $14,000. Did I say 400? I did say 100. Holy cow. You want to spend $14,000 on a 1200 millimeter lens. Be my guest. Not my thing. I'll do what I can with what I got. But that 1200 millimeter lens, amazing shots at 1200 millimeters. I mean, you could basically find, you could be across the football field at the other goal post and shooting upfield and getting head and shoulder shots of the players. That's how far the zoom range is. Extreme telephoto is great for distance photos, nature, long distance scenery, astronomy, and also it can double as macro depending on what you're shooting and how you shoot it. Depends on if the lens allows you to flip a switch and change the focal distance and get into that macro range. Next, of course, since we've been talking about macro, a makeshift macro is macro lenses. What this does is it almost flips the lens around. So instead of being, here's real life and here I'm going to reproduce it on the film plane as real life, it's actually kind of like if you take the binoculars and flip them over and that's what you're looking at. You know how everything in the room gets super tiny, but you can see everything. It's the same thought process with macro, and that's basically what it does, is it shrinks it down and collects the light accordingly, and then makes it bigger when it hits the film plane. So that's where you get your 1-to-1 reproduction rates and stuff like that. So if you have a penny that you're photographing and you take that penny and put it directly on that 35 millimeter frame or on your photo, and it's a 1-to-1, that means that the penny in real life is the same size in real life that it is on the film. I know that sounds confusing. Let me try that again. If you have any object, it doesn't matter. If you have a pen, the tip of a pen, okay? So that tip of that pen, when you photograph it, will be the same size in real life. So here it is in real life on the film plane. So that's what 1-to-1 is. 1-to-2 would be double. 2-to-1 would be halved. So that's how you kind of tell your macro range depending on what you're shooting for macro. Now, how many people get that technical when shooting macro? Probably not too many, but you know, it is nice to know some of the science and the way people think of it sometimes in the community. So that's a really neat situation. Now, the other thing macros do is it makes a minimum focal distance. In other words, how close can you focus with that lens? Almost right on top of that last element. I mean, we're talking inches usually. So you can usually take that pen, for example. You could, instead of focusing this far away, you're actually focusing like right up here, you know, kind of doing one of these numbers and being like, okay, I got it. I can see it. And that's the whole idea behind macro. You can focus a lot closer, which then reproduces it on the film plane much larger, thus blowing it up and giving you something that looks like you put it under a microscope. So that's macro lenses. That's pretty much all the different types of lenses, except for I didn't go over tilt shift. Tilt shift, basically, it allows you to take, I'll show you one in a little bit here. It takes and allows you to move the elements left, right, up, down, so you can shift things. What this does for you is when you're taking building shots or architectural shots, the converging lines effect. Instead of having walls that are perfectly perpendicular on the film plane, they tend to converge wherever your focal point is. So what you can do with the tilt shift is you shift the lens one way, the other, up or down, and it changes how the perspective of perpendicular lines or leading lines are in the photo. It also makes it the tilt shift lens. This is a really neat effect too if you ever get a chance to try it. Tilt shift lenses allow you to literally you're staring into a mirror and you can see you, right? If you take and you shift the lens to the right or left far enough, you can eventually get rid of your reflection in the mirror and just take the mirror. So that's kind of a neat effect that tilt shift lenses can do. So there's your ranges. Now the question comes down to what is the lens speed? What's the f-stop idea? What makes the f-stop thought process? Why is f1.2 more expensive than f3.5? So fast lenses, f1.2 to f3.5, great for low light, extreme blurring of backgrounds, makes it really beautiful portraits. The reason why lenses get more and more expensive the lower the f-stop number, so f1.8, f2.8, somewhere in that range is because the opening of the lens is the same size as the distance of the lens. So saying if you have a 200 millimeter lens and you have an f of f2, okay, you're going to have 100 millimeter opening inside that lens. So that's why a lot of really fast lenses are very large and heavy, because they're bigger, they're bulkier. Whereas the smaller opening lenses like an f3.5 or an f4 can be made a lot lighter because the opening's not as big. So your casing's not as big. Your front elements and the elements inside the lens aren't as big. So that's really the key there, why there's a big price difference. But here's the thing. Fast lenses, great for low light, extreme blurring of backgrounds. If you're going to shoot a band, speaking of bands tonight, I forgot to make the announcement. Good friends of mine, Jimmy Shrek and B. Leo and the Shrimps are all up to the sideshow up in Geneva tonight, doing their gig. I'm not sure exactly what music they're playing, but they're doing a lot of electronic music and a lot of acoustical. So if you get a chance to get out and you want to get out and listen to some great music, possibly catch up with me. I'll be up there probably taking photos right at 9. So they start at 9. It's the sideshow in Geneva, downtown Geneva, Exchange Street. Go check it out. Come on up, have a good time, support your local bands. There you go, B. I did it. I forgot about it, but I did it. So back to the lens speeds and stuff. Fast lenses, now we got normal speed lenses. Normal speed lenses are f3.5 to f5.6. Generally a lot lower cost lens because they don't have to build as much glass. They don't have to make the casing as big. Great for fairly soft focuses, but not real soft focuses. They can be used in low light situations, but usually if you're going to use them in low light situations, you're probably going to want to run them on a tripod or some other support system. I've seen, now here's a neat product if you ever want to check it out. There is this thing called Not a Tripod, and it's a pair of inverted suspenders that you wear. It attaches to your belt and then attaches to your camera, and then you stretch it right out until it's taut, and then that gives you stability like a tripod. I haven't tried one. I've been dying to find out if anybody else has tried one. So if you ever get a chance to try one, or if you've seen somebody or you know somebody that's tried one, tell them to give me a shout here on Digital Babble, and that's thedigitalbabble@gmail.com. Then, of course, the slower lenses like f5.6 to f8, great for still subjects, tripod shooting, general shooting, and lots of light. Really not so good for, hand holding or, blurred portraits or stuff like that. So usually a little bit lower cost as well because, again, they don't have to build the lens so big. So let's get over to the photos page here. If you got a point and shoot, one of the great things about point and shoot is the lens is fixed. And what I mean by fixed is that you have a lens that's permanently attached to the camera. You get a zoom range, and what you want to do is look for an optical zoom range. Don't go with digital zoom. If something says it's got digital zoom, that's great, but that's really not what you really want to see. Because all digital zoom is taking so much of the sensor and then saying, oh yeah, I don't need any of that. Zoom into this part of the sensor and zoom into this part. And how far in on the sensor can I zoom? So like a 4x sensor zoom or digital zoom would be 1/4. The final size on the sensor that you would be looking at would be 1/4 the size of the full sensor. You lose a lot of quality. You lose a lot of, produces a lot of noise. You lose some color information. So digital zoom, not that great. Optical zoom, absolutely great. So that's what, if you're looking for a point and shoot, get a point and shoot with optical zoom. I have a Canon G12, and that has an equivalent, a 35 equivalent of 24 millimeter to 135 millimeter. So that's basically the lens on my camera, or my little point and shoot camera. Whereas my bigger camera that has interchangeable lenses or non-fixed lenses, I can buy any lens I want. So if I want a 200 millimeter lens, I can run a 200 millimeter lens, pop it off, put a new one on. I got a 35 millimeter lens. I don't like that, go with a 50 millimeter lens. There's so much you can do with it. And that is really truly the greatness of like SLRs versus point and shoots, is that it gives you more options. Now, if you're not looking for those options and you want to buy a point and shoot, what you're looking for is a good zoom range. You're trying to avoid the huge zoom ranges, because I've never seen a point and shoot with a really huge zoom range work that well up in the 200, 300, 400 millimeter range without being on a tripod. And a lot of people forget that, is that they need to stabilize the camera at those zoom ranges. And when you look at their pictures, you could tell, oh yeah, that was camera shake. They were moving. And you can get a ton better photos with those long zoom point and shoots by putting it on a tripod or finding some way to stabilize the camera. So that's really the best advice for point and shoots. Now, a good way to tell if you're getting a good point and shoot or a bad point and shoot is by the zoom range and the f-stop that the zoom range or the lens can operate at. Like the Canon G12 can be a 2.8 f2.8 lens at 24 to 135. So that's a really good lens for being on a small point and shoot, because I get a lot of blur for doing portraits. So I can soften the background up just with a point and shoot. Going back to my SLR, I've got, let's see, what's one of my, I got a 70 to 200 f2.8. So I go out to 200 millimeter and the background's totally blown away. It's just nothing but blotches of color, and the subject is tack sharp, and they look really, really hot. I'm telling you, hot. So, it just depends on what you want to invest and what you want to get and what you want to shoot with. It's all up to you. You're the photographer. You get to pick. And I'm just trying to offer some different opinions or viewpoints from these things. I like point and shoots. I also like SLRs. I prefer SLRs, and the reason being is because I like the ability to change lenses to whatever suits me at that point in time. So let's see, what do we got up first? I was going to show you tilt. This is a Canon TSE 17 millimeter, and that's the reason for the big bulb on top. The lens is so protruding outward because it has to collect all the light. It's very wide angle lens, extreme wide angle, and this is a tilt shift lens. And if you notice, there's the T there in the middle with the knob, and then there's the other two knobs on each side. What that does is allows you to tilt and shift the lens elements inside this lens in order to change leading lines and perspectives. I'll give you a better lowdown on this particular lens at some point, but just for this purpose, for explaining it here, the lens moves. So you can change your ability or change your focal points, change where the sweet spot of focusing is. There's a lot you can do with tilt shifts. Problem with tilt shifts, very expensive. $1,000, $2,000. I've seen them as high as $5,000. So buyer beware. If you're going to buy a tilt shift, you're going to put in some money. You can get the same kind of effect from something a little bit more cheaper, which is called a lens baby. And that is a type of, it's a type of kind of a lens attachment. It goes on your SLR or even on some point and shoots. I think they got a model that attaches to the front of a point and shoot. And what you can do is it's like a bellows, and you can move the element and move it around to get what you want, kind of the same way a tilt shift does, but not so clear, because there's not all that glass inside there. It does have some really interesting applications, but it's not exactly a tilt shift, but it gives you kind of the same effect as a tilt shift. So keep that in mind, LensBaby, lensbaby.com, or you can go to B&H Photo or at your favorite camera shop and go check it out. So let's see. So that was a tilt shift. Whoops. Here is a fisheye. Again, the fisheye lens bulges out past the end of the lens casing, and that's usually a telltale sign of an extreme wide angle lens or a fisheye lens. It collects all that information and then throws it onto the image plane. This is actually a zoom fisheye lens, 8 to 15 millimeter Canon. Very nice lens. I've shot with it once. I rented it once. Amazing photos. Problem being very expensive. I think this lens runs about $1,800. So it is something that if you're really going to do projects with, this is the type of lens to get if you're going to do these fisheye type things, and you want the better quality, and you don't want to go with like the smaller lenses or a prime lens. You can get something like this, and it's really amazing shots. Let's see, which one's this? This is a 70 to 200 millimeter. This is the exact same lens that I own right now that I really like. It's like carrying around a rifle. The thing is heavy, big, it's bulky. It has so much glass in it. It weighs about 2 pounds. But by the end of the day, it takes some amazing shots. I mean, we're talking the difference between gourmet dark chocolate and a Hershey's bar. Really, there's a huge difference there. What you can use this lens for is so many different applications. I use it at weddings. I do use it for portraits. I also use it for doing animal portraits, especially if I'm out in the yard trying to get animal portraits or pet portraits. I also have used this as a makeshift macro lens. Amazing, 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 amazing. Let's see. Next up is a super long lens. This is a 600 millimeter lens. Now, this is like probably toting around a 1646 iron ball Canon, strap it to your shoulder and go. I think this weighs about 5 pounds. It's big, it's huge, and it only has one ring, and the one ring is for focusing, and that's it. And it's 600 millimeters, so 3 times as far as I can reach with the 200 millimeter. It is an amazing lens. Also, again, amazing for certain types of applications, not so amazing for everyday shooting. This is a $6,000 lens, and it produces $6,000 photos. But the problem still is the fact that it's so big, it's so bulky. I mean, it takes a backpack to carry the thing. So depending on, but I just wanted to show it to you to show you all the different types of lenses in each group. So moving on to, let's see, 600. Let's try this one. Okay, now this shows a typical lineup of lenses from Canon, because I know Canon a lot better than I know Nikon. I'm not opposed to Nikon. I just know Canon better. And as you see here, they have such an assortment of lenses and lens accessories. They got 3 tilt shift lenses. You can see that in the lower right-hand corner. They've got extenders and extension tubes down in the lower right-hand corner. You got your big lenses there in the bottom there. You got, I don't think I can read it. No, I can't read it. You guys probably can't read it either. But they're got some big lenses, and then they work all the way down to the smaller lenses, and you see the difference here. Each lens has different ranges, and you can kind of tell that the longer the lens, probably the longer the millimeter. So 200 millimeters, 300 millimeters, and so on and so forth. So, but that just shows you the array of lenses that you can buy, and that's why I love the versatility of a DSLR. Oh, whoops. That wasn't what I wanted here. Hang on, let's see. Am I done with the... Hang on. Pardon me for 1 second. I think these are... Okay, so these are all different examples of shots that I've taken or I found that kind of depicts this. So this is a 300 millimeter. This was shot at 300 millimeters at Burnett Park Zoo. This was their golden boy Leo. I think he's passed away since now, but... he was an amazing cat, loved to pose on his rock, and that's exactly what he did for me. I put the lens right up against the glass, put it all the way out to 300 millimeter. It almost looks like I was doing an official portrait with the kitty inside his cage, and I wasn't. I was in the safety of the glass. So really wonderful shot. I love the shot. I actually have it printed and hung up in my house someplace. I don't know. I just really like the shot. But great example of 300 millimeter. Here is a great example of using a telephoto as a macro lens. So this is at 200 millimeter, turned on the macro switch and shot a morning glory. Wonderful shot. The colors just pop. You can see the grain of the plant and the petals. And you can see that there's fairly short depth of field. The green in the background is really fairly distorted and out of focus, but those petals are right in perfect focus. So let's see. The next example is a 50 millimeter example. Oh, this is a 50 millimeter diagram, so it shows you where they kind of come up with the idea of what the lens lengths are. So from the front element of the lens to the film plane, which is kind of where I was trying to draw it, is 50 millimeters. So if you were to measure 50 millimeters out, that's exactly how they come up with numbering their lenses. So a 50 millimeter means that it's a normal or standard lens. If you go higher than that, or a longer lens like 100 millimeters, that means that you can reach twice the distance. If you go 25 millimeters, you reach half the distance, or it opens up the lens. So that's kind of how you can kind of judge where you're at in the whole grand scheme of things. And that's how they derive lens numbers, is from the millimeters from the front of the lens to the film plane. Whoops, I lost where I was. Hang on. So let's see, which one's this? Okay, so here's a 50 millimeter example. I saw this lighthouse sitting in Sodas Bay, and I wanted to capture it as I saw it. I set the lens to 50 millimeter and shot, and this is what I got. And I remember this shot. I remember this house, and that's exactly what it looked like from my perspective. No compression from being zoomed in too far, no wide angle distortion. 50 millimeter gave me exactly what I remember seeing that day. Whoops. Here is a great example of a 200 millimeter macro shot. This is my keyboard, actually, that's behind me over here. Took it at a probably a little off of 90, probably 80 degrees above and about 10 degrees back. Shot right into it, had it lit from the right side of the frame so the keys would light up so you could see the keys because the keys are black. Great 50 millimeter. That reproduced those keys at a 1-to-2 ratio, so the keys were twice the size in real life than they are on the film plane. Now here's a great example of 24 millimeter or wide angle lens shot. This is I believe this is Sonnenberg Gardens up in Canandaigua, and it's a wonderful place to visit, especially if you can get some nice overcast days or just some partly cloudy days, so that you can get some kind of cloud cover, so you can get some evenly lit shots. As you can see here, I was having a hard time getting an evenly lit shot. The waterfall is almost in darkness. The water is real bright. You can see all the way to the bottom. The plant up in the upper right hand bottom corner is overexposed. I tried to correct it the best I could with Photoshop. But you can see there's a lot of extremes here. But this is a telltale sign of looking at the shot. If you look right at that middle point horizontal line there, that really was fairly flat. But if you really look at this picture, it almost looks bowed. And that little bit of 24 millimeter wide angle bowing, that distortion, the wide angle distortion, the fisheye effect, you can see that in this 24 millimeter lens. One of the downsides, but it really didn't destroy the picture. I still like this picture. It's a very nice picture. I think I would like to go shoot it again and again until I got it right. But this is what I got that day, and I really think it's a decent shot. Could have been a lot better, but that kind of gives you examples of different, totally different lenses for different situations. And now, with your point and shoot, I know all you point and shoot people out there are probably all upset with me because I haven't talked about point and shoot. Point and shoot is the same thought process, but you only have one lens attached to it. So if you've got a 28 to 140 millimeter lens on it, that's all you got. But that doesn't mean that you can't shoot the same things that we're shooting. It's just, somebody that has an SLR versus a point and shoot, you can get the same stuff. You can get better stuff depending on if you know your camera well enough. A 24 millimeter shot on an SLR is a 24 millimeter shot on a point and shoot. The bigger difference, I think, is the size of the sensors. On a lot of point and shoots, the sensor size is very, very small. And we're only talking, I think it's like 10 millimeter by 12 millimeter. Very, very small. Versus a full-framed SLR, which is a full 35 millimeters across by 24.6 millimeters vertically. So you got a lot more sensor to work with. So that's one of the big key differences between point and shoot and SLR. But again, you can still get some amazing results from point and shoot. I've seen people that have shot with Canon G12s, G15s, Nikons, like the one you see on screen here. And just because they know their camera, they know how to meter for it, they know how to set it manually, they get some really amazing shots. I mean, just absolutely amazing. I saw somebody win a photo show one time with a point and shoot. So, don't take it the wrong way when I talk SLR, because it really applies to point and shoot. The difference is the SLRs are interchangeable, and that's why I usually talk more that direction, because there's a lot more you could do with it. If I don't like that it only goes to 140 millimeter, guess what? I go buy another lens, pop it on. I can now go to 400 millimeter. So back to just talking a little bit more about prime and zoom lenses. Prime sets the length statically, so it's 50 millimeter, 100 millimeter, 200 millimeter. You can't change it, so you got to get up and move. So if you don't like your perspective here, you don't like the way it's framed up, you want to zoom in a little bit, zoom out a little bit, well, guess what? You're going to have to get up and move. You're going to have to move that body, move in, move out, change your perspective accordingly. And that's why prime lenses usually deter a lot of amateurs. I don't know why. I've heard that so many times. I don't know if it's really true, but I've heard it, that prime lenses tend to deter amateurs. I could see why. It deterred me at first. I had a 50 millimeter lens. I didn't know what the heck to do with it. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't just stand here and be out of the way and take that shot. No, I got to get into the frame, figure out where I want to frame, and move the camera in and out until I get it where I want it. And the physical movement of the body, the camera, to get the shot. Versus a zoom lens. I can stand in one position. Now I can go from 24 millimeter all the way into 200 millimeter with just a rotation of that front lens. And I can go from looking at the whole scene to looking at just somebody's head and shoulders. And that's really a neat thing, and it's great for weddings. I couldn't live without my zoom lenses at weddings, because things change so rapidly. I would spend all day just switching out lenses for each different situation. Oh, okay, got to go from the 70 to 200 back to the 50, and then 70 to 200. I got to go from the 200 to the 70. Okay, now I got to go to the 50. Oh, now I got to take a really wide angle group shot for the bridal party. Okay, now I got to go to a 24 millimeter. It would get tedious, and that's where zoom lenses really come in and they really shine. As if you're out shooting a wedding or you shooting something that changes a lot, sporting events, group portraits. Zoom lenses are an invaluable equipment to have on you when doing these projects. Zooms typically are slower than prime lenses. Prime lenses usually will be a little bit faster, have a better opening, have better glass in it. Zoom lenses have more glass in it, which then gives you a color distortion, color shifts, focus shifts, distortion. I mean, there's so many different things that can go wrong with all those moving elements to get the lens length to change accordingly. One thing, if you're buying zoom lenses, and this is always a good thing about pricing and about quality and so on and so forth, is that you want to find out if the front of the lens rotates. Now, if the front of the lens rotates when focusing or when zooming, it's a good chance you're going to get a cheaper lens, possibly less quality lens, but today's standards, you probably get away with it. But really, where that becomes a problem is when you put filters on the front of it. So you attach to the front of the camera, maybe a filter like a circular polarizer or a warming filter or a cooling filter, if there's any polarization where if you turn that left or right or up or down, it changes the effect, that becomes very bad, because then you have to reset your filter every time you change your zoom. So something to be aware of. I personally like internal focusing lenses. Nothing on the outside moves when the camera's focusing or when the camera's zooming. This way I don't have to worry about thinking about my zoom lens is going to be bigger or smaller when I go to move or change or whatever. Now I've only seen 2 zoom lenses that actually the outside elements don't move, and everything's done inside. But I do like the internal focusing lenses, which you can see those are a lot more common. When you zoom, the lens still changes length, but when you focus, it doesn't move or it doesn't rotate. It doesn't do any of that. So that's kind of something to look for. That's a nice little added feature. It does cost, premium, but still it's really neat to have. So if you're a starting out photographer, get a nice point and shoot, something with a decent zoom range, optical zoom range. You can get one pretty decent for about $200 to $300. If you look on Amazon, eBay, sometimes you can find some older cameras, older point and shoots like the G12 or even the G10 from Canon, and they're pretty decent, and you can get them for fairly cheap. If you don't mind going with used stuff, you can go right to like places like Adorama or B&H Photo Video or your local camera shop. Sometimes they might have some used stuff that they're trying to get rid of, and they might give you one heck of a price on it. So like if you're looking to get into the SLRs, see if somebody's got a used digital SLR that you might be able to buy for cheap, and put a cheap lens on it and start shooting and see if you like it. SLR, I think most people, once you go SLR, you tend not to go back the other way too much, mostly because I think you see the differences. Like me, I use my point and shoot for not so critical stuff, and then I use my SLR for critical stuff. So I guess that's how I differentiate the two types of cameras, really. So that being said, that's been the Digital Babble here this week. It's all about lenses. I think in the future weeks we'll probably start talking about different scenes and different lenses. Maybe we'll go a little bit more in depth on a lens. I didn't get to any Photoshop things this week. I'm so sorry. I know everybody likes the Photoshop stuff. I'll do some next week. I'll keep the examples that I have this week, and I'll do it next week. Maybe play some devil's advocate and ruin a photo and bring it back. What was I going to say? There was something else I was going to say. Oh, well, I guess I'm going to close the show. Anyway, I'm Flipper. This is the Digital Babble. I'm on every Wednesday night, most Wednesday nights. On fingerlicks1.com, fingerlicks1.tv. Go check us out on Facebook. You can go check out our website, tdbny.com. Go check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/thedigitalbabble. If you want to send us an email, send us your questions. Please, I love questions. If you give me questions, I'll answer them. I'll even explain it better. thedigitalbabble@gmail.com. What else? Did I miss anything? I don't think I did. Maybe I didn't. Whatever. So anyway, catch you every Wednesday here on the Digital Babble. I will catch you on the flip side.
A Flipside Studio production. It's the Digital Babble. Tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on fingerlicks1.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter.